In the beginning, there was nothing. Interactive video entertainment was but a mere impossible dream. But then one day, it came. The very first video game. Alex Kidd. But that game was too hard for the average human being, which is why today it has been relegated to the most professional tiers of competitive esports. But then, the creators of the popular kids cartoon Ren and Stimpy visualized a world where cartoons could not only be a passive means of entertainment, but an interactive one as well.
You're angry?
Mind you, this was way before the guys who made Cuphead or Rick and Morty were even born. Enter UFOs, a grand tale of space exploration and self-discovery, where you take the role of an alien who, due to unforeseen circumstances and a cruel twist of fate, finds himself stranded on planet Earth after his spaceship crashes. Throughout this adventure, you will explode pigs, become best friends with a cocaine-ridden platypus, manipulate him into scamming people, indulge in out-of-date cereal, attempt to communicate via brainwaves with a clown who just took DMT, participate in a riveting, realistically portrayed aggressive bar fight that still inspires scenes in modern video games today, such as this classic sequence from Uncharted 3. But when movies and TV shows like Reboot are beginning to push 3D graphics, or CGI, into the mainstream, two-dimensional graphics will not cut it anymore. The developers of UFOs, Disney Graphics, had been working on a new Ren and Stimpy video game, but it was 2D, so now the chances of it getting a spotlight were slim. Not to mention that Disney Graphics, at the time under the helm of Michael Disney, had been battling for decades with their rival in the home console department, Hanna-Barbera. But now...
Here comes a new challenger!
Sony. Hold up, let's rewind the tape a little bit. It is widely believed that the first video game for the Sony PlayStation was Bubsy 3D. The 3D in the title was important to make sure that people knew that Sony wasn't bullshitting around. This is real 3D, and it's here to stay. Before the PlayStation, games just could not be in 3D at all, because 3D only existed in movies and TV. Up until then, video games would just have to be drawn on paper, like UFOs, which is where Disney Graphics excelled. Since the console was so advanced for its time, being the first ever to be able to render 3D graphics, there had to be a trade-off. And that was color. The first 3D video games were in black and white, which was cool because it meant that the games could also be played in older TV sets that your grandmother would have lying around the house your parents would dump you at on school days. Before the PlayStation, the only console available on the market was the famous Atari 4800, which instantly stopped being sold the moment Sony stepped in the ring, because the Atari still had some parts made out of wood, which were dangerous to children, unlike the PlayStation's much safer all-plastic approach. But the people wanted more. People wanted to see how sports would transpose to this exciting new dimension. Was born from this predicament, and their first game was Libero Grande! That game was actually only released in Spain, who were like, "Vamos a ganar todo el dinero con el juego de fútbol." So Portugal, right next to them, were like, "Uai, que filho, olha me chula da puta, também quero, what?" And thus, released worldwide, Ronaldo v Football was born, paying tribute to Cristiano Ronaldo, the world's greatest football player. The other famous Ronaldo, who only existed in Brazil, developed his own game by himself and made a deal with Nintendo to publish it on their new 3D console, the Nintendo 64. But sadly, that didn't work as well. Of course, the PlayStation was missing out on some of the more mature content that Disney Graphics had not only provided, but pioneered as well. And eventually games like Mortal Kombat and Tekken would come to realize in full three-dimensional glory the violence and gore of 2D fighting classics of old, such as this memorable section from UFOs.
Round 1! Ready? Fight!
For Disney Graphics, however, this meant they had to catch up, and they started meddling with 3D on an experimental little title called Hercules. In this forgotten prequel to the now infamous God of War series, you play as Kratos' brother Herc, and you can see that while he and the other characters are still two-dimensional, much of the game world is now rendered in brutal 3D. Of course, Disney Graphics would need many years of experience to reach their current levels of quality, but at least now, they finally had a chance to prove themselves.
Oh shit! Here come the Marvel boys!
Not this time, Sinister Six!
Why don't we put a smile on their face, Spider-Man?
Spider-Man, by Marvel Interactive, was a groundbreaking smash hit, and it proved that a cartoon-slash-comic company could handle 3D graphics like a pro, unlike Disney Graphics.
I've had enough of your stupid questions!
Sure, some well-known IPs started to make their way into the new, extra dimension, but the PlayStation was also where up-and-coming franchises really began to shine. Take Call of Duty as an example. Everyone knows Call of Duty. The first game was two-dimensional, with a top-down view, and it was a little rough on the edges.
That'll take the sting off it.
But then, Call of Duty 2 stepped up the game and really brought the battlefield into your living room. Or your kitchen, if that's where you prefer to spend your leisure time. Call of Duty 3 Advanced Warfare took the fight for freedom to the ultimate frontier. Space! And this was way before Elon Musk was around to put a twist in the whole space thing and put Super Mario in a space shuttle and send him drifting off into the vast unknown. But then, Call of Duty 4 came out, and it was like,
Damn, brother, where'd you find this graphic, son?
Final Fantasy VII, the first game of the popular Japanese cross-dressing series Final Fantasy, was also released on a PlayStation. This game, considered now a cult classic by millions of fans, was actually review bombed in 1997 when it came out, because the hype around it was so big for the graphics. Turned out all those good graphics were actually reserved for cutscenes. Since the game didn't sell very well, Final Fantasy almost turned out to be Squaresoft's Final Fantasy. But by entering a partnership with Coca-Cola, they managed to get enough money to make a sequel, Final Fantasy VII. And thus, in the year 2000, the sequel to Final Fantasy VII would finally be released. Final Fantasy IX. Japanese media man Hideo Kojima didn't take his name for granted and set out to make the first virtual reality game for the PlayStation, Metal Gear Solid VR Missions, which was pretty okay, but didn't really hit the nail in the head when it comes to what the public expected VR to be in the late 90s.
Wow! What was that about?
We are now reaching the point where the simulations are so realistic that the line between playing a game or simulation, and actually blowing people up is becoming blurred.
I've had extensive training, the kind that's indistinguishable from the real thing. VR, huh? That's far more effective than live exercises.
This situation, I find it very nostalgic. Yeah, well, I doubt it accurately simulates the events of that mission.
Freeze. But nothing seems real.
There's no such thing as miracles or the supernatural, only cutting-edge technology.
It's like being in a nightmare you can't wake up from.
Jack, snap out of it.
I'm not sure. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between reality and a game.
Nobody's aware of it, but there's a subsystem in place. It's about to be activated.
It's like one of my Japanese animes.
Hey, I know things seem bad right now, but I just shit in a forehead, and I can't get out of this fucking suit.
Watching from a distance with slight concern, Disney Graphics would now release another game on the PlayStation, Dicky Mouse in the Castle of Pain, which even though was running on the new PlayStation hardware, it was still mostly two-dimensional, but things would start warming up soon for Disney. Remember when I said video games were trying to emulate the 3D graphics we were seeing in movies and TV?
Plot twist!
The tables have turned! Movie studios now want in on the action! A little-known developer by the name of Naughty Dog had just released their Mortal Kombat clone, Way of the Warrior. Film production giant Universal Studios decided they wanted to do interactive media, which movies obviously were not. So they created
Universal Interactive Studios.
They contacted
Naughty Dog
with a plan. They all sat in an office, and Universal was like, okay, here's the idea. Indiana Jones, popular series. How about we make a game that's kinda like Indiana Jones, but it's a video game instead of a movie. You'll have shooting, action sequences, great story, character development, memorable set pieces, a charismatic protagonist, and we'll call it
Hanyarte Trail of Batuta.
But Naughty Dog were like,
I don't know, man. There's, we've been looking around at what's being made, and there's already this Tomb Raider game coming out that kind of does that already. You know what you're describing, and the team. We're all really into those Ren and Stimpy games, so maybe we should do our take on it.
Crash Bandicoot was a pretty decent game, and despite it having hand-drawn cartoon graphics instead of 3D, it still garnered critical praise and commercial success. Not enough to make it the console's official mascot though, because again, it wasn't 3D, and Mario was just around the corner beating Crash to it. Coming from a violent and gory game, such as Way of the Warrior, you'd expect Crash to bring to the table some of the more risque, nuanced storytelling elements that were so abundant in UFOs, but sadly, that wasn't the case. Crash Bandicoot also found friendly rivalry in Spyro, a game about a tiny dragon who runs around bumping his head into statues.
Hey, Spyro!
The cool thing about Spyro is that as part of an ingenious promotional stunt in the 90s, you could actually take a copy of the game and bump it into a real-life dragon statue for the same effect.
And there you have it, black smoke into the air to the point where some of the buildings here, you can see the soot on them as well as on the flags that are outside. Let's talk about the evacuations. The FDNY telling us that they have found high levels of carbon monoxide in just about all of the buildings.
Sadly, Spyro would lose to another unlikely rival in the purple department, UFOs. Sorry, Spyro. Alas, Universal was pissed with the Naughty Dog situation, because now Disney Graphics would seize the opportunity to acquire the rights to Indiana Jones and sneakily start building their future gaming empire. However, Disney was still struggling with their games. It would take years for the public to discover that Disney Graphics wasn't doing so good in the graphics department, because most of their graphics were actually being redirected to Pixar Graphics, who were busy at work leveraging their pipeline for the safer play, which was still movies, such as Ratatouille.
Ah, the most beautiful view in the world, Sugarloaf Mountain, overlooking Rio de Janeiro, where the most famous restaurant belongs to A mouse?
Meanwhile, Marvel Interactive was really kicking things off with Spider-Man 2, which was even better than Spider-Man 1. But then, guess what happened? Boom! Disney Graphics bought Marvel Interactive. So now Disney had all the graphics from Marvel games to do as they pleased.
Dude, this is great!
Harry, I was just walking past Dumbledore's chamber, and I overheard him talk about a forbidden powerful new spell called cock-wanking.
Ron, I'm not a wizard anymore. I'm an American now.
What, Harry? You're fucking mental?
I'm sorry, Ron. But then Sony, they were like,
yo, hold up. Damn, those some nice graphics you got there. Mind if we, borrow some?
Shit, said Michael Disney. The director of PlayStation's parent company, Tony Sony, made them an offer they couldn't refuse, which was actually more of a demand than an offer, because if Disney didn't comply, they would be barred from getting any more games published on the system that was all the rage at the time. So Disney was forced to give most of their graphics away. And since a lot of those graphics were still on the computers at Marvel Interactive, because the graphics were originally from Spider-Man, Sony had to take the computers and the franchise with them. And with that, Sony used all the graphics to make 3 Spider-Man movies.
No playing in the streets.
Yes, Mr. Spider-Man.
See ya.
Which were great movies, except for the third one, because they spent so much money that they ran out of graphics for the Spidey suit, so it had to be rendered without color. Nonetheless, the trilogy as a whole was a massive win, because Sony had a huge amount of refined graphics at their disposal. Which is why Disney took a sharp fall in quality when they started making more video games based on their own movies, because the tech just wasn't there anymore. They were robbed of their good graphics and left only with dust. Meanwhile, Sony was using their new IP to elevate the brand to new heights, even using the Spider-Man movie font for the PlayStation 3 logo. Since Spider-Man 2 was arguably the biggest movie of its time, Sony used the opportunity to create the Blu-ray Graphics Consortium, which consisted of a selection of companies who would adopt the new disc standard and force movie studios to use it as well for their home video releases. Since Blu-rays could hold much more graphics than DVDs, video games and movies could both benefit and display more graphics than ever before. But Disney Graphics didn't lay down their arms, and in a desperate move to obtain those precious graphics back, they bought Marvel. So in the end, everything worked just fine for Disney.
Not so fast, brother!
You see, the deal stated that Disney would get all the Marvel IPs, all the way from Captain America to Captain Britain, even including 3D Man, who Disney was particularly interested in because it would only make sense that this character would be able to bring a substantial amount of graphics to the table, perhaps even more graphics than Sony's very own Polygon Man.
Power is an illusion. Absolute power is a seamless illusion.
But the deal didn't include Spider-Man, because that was now on Sony's side. So now Disney couldn't include him in their cinematic universe. Eventually, Sony would allow Disney to include Spider-Man in the franchise, but under 3 conditions. First, the movies would still be published by Sony, who would retain most of the rights. Second, the movies could not use the PlayStation 3 font anymore, so they had to change it. And third, Spider-Man could not be played by Tobey Maguire anymore. The honor would go directly to the son of Tony Sony, Justin Belloni, who, due to being underage, would take a new, more honest, childlike approach to the character. And those movies were pretty okay, I guess. In the end, Sony won, Marvel won, Disney Graphics won, the public won, graced by the incredibly polished narratives bestowed upon other franchises now under the Disney umbrella, such as Star Wars. Eventually, Disney went on a massive spending spree in order to buy every single fucking company on Earth, and we all know how that went. The only person in this whole mess that didn't win was Tobey Maguire, who was left out of the MCU, but that has now been fixed by Toby in the MCU, a YouTube channel who seeks to do him justice by placing him in the scenes from the movies where he was originally intended to appear.
That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?
Am I deviating too much from the original topic, the PlayStation? Maybe, but ultimately, that's what the PlayStation stands for. It is a dream vehicle, one that makes you wander to faraway places as soon as you start playing a game. Because you believe in it. You believe you can be anything you want. And that is the feeling you want to get when you enter a world of graphics abundance. Now, generations later with the PS5, graphics are more abundant than ever, which explains why the graphics market has been plummeting due to logarithmically increased availability. So gamers now have much to look forward to. But will we ever see a renaissance of Disney graphics UFOs? We may never know. Oh, there it is!